Welcome to the Diversity Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Kratz. This season, we're having sweaty conversations for change. We're talking with guests about uncomfortable conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion needed to pivot towards positive change. We do this podcast because it's important that all voices are heard, all people are seen, and all people feel a sense of belonging in their workplaces. Let's meet this week's guest. Welcome to the Diversity Pivot Podcast. I am so excited to have Anthony Paradiso with us. He is very passionate about inclusion, diversity, and equity in our professional careers, but also our personal lives. He's also the founder and president of AllThingzAP, where his primary mission is for all to be their authentic selves. He's also the host of councils and boards that include the Bergen County Human Relations Commissioner and a board member to the New Bridge Medical Center Foundation. He's been quoted in several articles about this topic and is becoming more involved in local politics as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. He thinks it's important that we have representation and have a seat at the table. He ran his platform around surrounding the importance of diversity of thought and embracing inclusion, and everyone should have a voice regardless of their dimensions of diversity. He's also a member of the New Jersey LGBT Chamber and the NGLL LCC, naturally certified. He's got a broad background in business and constantly strives to be that top performing diplomat. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. It's great being here.
Well, I'd love to start, as we always do, with kind of an uncomfortable conversation. We know D&I is uncomfortable by nature. Tell us about a time when you got into a sticky situation or had an uncomfortable conversation around diversity.
Oh, I've had many of them. But the ones that really stick out to me, a lot of times they're often usually with family, just because you see them constantly and, there's really no way around that, unless you don't speak to them, which you try not to do. Often, so my people in my family are in they're older and they're in their late 80s. So they use some terms that that I don't appreciate, don't like. Like they use the word colored a few times, and maybe when I was in my mid-20s, I probably wouldn't have said anything. But now that I'm just turning 40, I'm like, you know what? It's time to say something. I mean, I'm not that I just did it recently. I mean, it's a few years ago it happened. I'm like, you can't really say anymore that, oh, well, they're older and that's the time that's the time that they were in. I'm like, first off, we haven't used the word colored since the 60s. So that we're now, what's that, like 50, 60 years away. So come on. I mean, colored is not what we use. It's not the word. It's, we do use black now or person of color, or you could always, even when you're with a marginalized group, you could always ask that person how they want to be, self-described as. Some people don't like being under the umbrella person of color or black. You have to ask sometimes and not assume. So I kind of educated my grandmother on that, and other things too. Is actually same category in a way, but using referencing Asian people as Oriental again. That hasn't been used in a very long time. So I just try to educate. So I don't just tell the person, this is the word we use now, but I also try to give them a little bit of an explanation as to why we do that. I've had a lot of things too, as you mentioned before too. I'm running for town council. And one of the things that, my running mate and I, one of the things that we focus on with our platforms is diversity and inclusion. And one of the things we've been really trying to have in our town is a flag being raised every month for whatever month that would be. So either, obviously June is Pride Month, Black History Month. This month is Hispanic, Heritage Month. And just kind of using, just kind of having those flags flown to show the community that you support those in here that fall within that group. And I've had this go, the town that I'm in, it's a great town. um but there have been some um issues surrounding the pride flag, and the pride flag is very important to me. And I know I'm kind of going above and beyond probably the question of what you're asked, but it's important to me. Someone like my age, I've come out now. I've gone through the process. Listen, it's every day. There's always something that you have to kind of think about when I walk out my door. I have to make sure that I'm safe sometimes. I mean, but for the most part, I'm fine. It's the younger people, the people that are in high school, middle school, that when people in your town who are in a leadership or an elected position that are voting no to having a pride flag flown, that the young people hear about that. People may not think they do, because people may think, oh, no one listens to local politics, but it's true. So I've had a lot
Yeah.
of conversations with trying to have having the pride flag raised, discussing why it's important. And then just a lot of times you hear a lot of people say back to that, well, if we fly the pride flag, we can fly any flag, like like the Nazi flag. And
Jeez.
yeah, and I'm like, well, first off, no one's saying we fly that flag. I mean, they're two totally different flags. But it's just those conversations, and when you hear some of the things that people say back to you, like, well, if you fly this flag, we have to fly then what if someone requests this other flag? You're like, sometimes you get like, you just don't, some of the responses that you get sometimes, you're like, you just never, you just don't know how to respond, or you're kind of just,
Like, how is that? How does your mind link those two things?
yeah, how do you link those two things together? But they do get linked together.
Yeah. Well, and I
So those are
think
just,
people are afraid of what they don't understand, right?
yes,
And so if
yeah,
somebody grew up in a very like straight, maybe cisgender house and doesn't have a lot of friends, or doesn't think they have a lot of friends or family or coworkers that are in the LGBTQ plus community, sometimes it's easy to be afraid. But you're right, like young people are listening. Like, is this a
exactly,
place where I can be safe? Is this a place where people are going to stick up for me if something doesn't go well?
exactly.
And those flags are signals I call them like ally signals, signaling like this is a place you belong. This is a place where we accept you. And so flying those flags, having those ally symbols really helps people see themselves as a part of the community and the fabric of the community. And just
Absolutely.
because we do one doesn't mean you have to jump to another radical
Exactly.
angle.
That's the thing. I bet it's the jump that people, I'm like they're totally two different things. And I guess the conversation that I guess I missed, an opportunity I missed now that I'm talking to you, is I probably should ask that person, why are you even mentioning that flag? I mean, is it I mean, maybe it's very possible that the person that questioned me on the pride flag feels the pride flag is in a similar genre as the Nazi flag. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, I probably should have dig deeper into that conversation, because maybe that person doesn't know the history of the pride flag,
Yeah, that's
or
a really good
or
point.
or may look at the pride flag as a political thing, where it really where it really isn't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a lack of understanding, a lack of awareness. And, if we want to have productive conversations around diversity and inclusion, we've got to kind of meet people where they're at. And I think this frustrates folks that are already marginalized, already don't see themselves reflected in most societies, having to educate the majority group on like, hey, here's what the flag is about. Here's why it's not the same as the other flag. And let's unpack that together and just do a little bit of education on that, because unfortunately, if they don't know what they don't know, right? And so they fill in the
Exactly.
blanks, the fear blanks, with some stretched thinking, perhaps some inventive
Yeah,
thinking.
exactly. No, that's what it is. And I live in a very, I live in a pretty, I mean, the county, I live in Bergen County, New Jersey, so I'm in a pretty, it's a, it's a certainly a blue leaning county, but there are some sections like where I live where are more red leaning. but overall in accounting itself. So it is a pretty uh, it's a pretty I don't want to say maybe not progressive, but definitely it's definitely as a whole it's definitely a diverse county.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like I said, there's areas that are not so diverse,
Yeah.
and those are the areas the education is needed. And I mean, I look at myself. I came out in my mid 20s, and had my school or my community had a pride flag up, I may have come out sooner. I mean, I can't say for sure. I mean, I don't know, but had I seen more of that, it's just starting now to become a lot more acceptable. In the country as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like I said, if things, if flags were out sooner, there would have been a lot of people like me. Maybe I would have came out. Maybe I would have came out sooner. Maybe I wouldn't have. Who knows? But
But it is important to note, like, we're taking in our environments all the time, whether it's young people today or people of color when they enter white communities, or LGBTQ folks when you enter more, conservative area. You're kind of like looking around, like, is this a place where I belong? Is this a place where I feel safe? Is this a place where I'm really going to be accepted? Or do I have to kind of show a different version of myself in that situation? And that's the part that's so painful in the work I do in corporate America. It's like, if someone can't like be their full selves in an environment, in a work environment, like, there's no way you're getting the most out of that person.
yeah, that's exactly which is what I do on the consulting side of it. I try to have organizations understand the importance of letting each person be their authentic self, whatever that person is.
Yep.
If they're black, if they're LGBTQ, whatever group they fall under, they let them be who they are, because you're going to get them at their best when they are being their full authentic self. They're going to be more innovative, efficient. They're going to be more involved in a team. They're going to be expressing more of the ideas. They're going to express ideas that are different than others. So you have more competition in your own. You have more of a competitive drive within your own organization, because I mean competition is so huge now that you want to hear different ideas within your
Mm-hmm.
organization. So when
Yeah.
you have people out there who are really who believe they can be who they are out and about in the workplace, yeah, it's important, and it's really important for organizations to understand that. And some organizations are starting to understand that. Some aren't there yet, but I think it is being discussed. um so I mean, hopefully continues to be continues to be discussed. And and just hopefully also, just to piggyback on with organizations, not necessarily on the authentic self point, but a lot of companies after the George Floyd incident issued solidarity statements. I consulted a lot of organizations on their statements, but my one of my top things I always told them is, if you're going to make a statement, you have to follow through and you have to commit to action. If you're going to just issue a statement just because you want to issue one, but do nothing about it, then don't bother putting anything up, because that's going to hurt you in the end. People are going to ask you, oh, well, what did you do after the statement? And
Yeah.
so, just make sure. My advice is always people to, if you issue a statement, commit to action, create a D&I council, create some kind of um, a group that can help the organization make sure that they're striving for what their mission is in the diversity inclusion space.
Yeah. Yeah. We kind of frame it very similarly here at Next Pivot Point. It's, you have to be intentional. Right? So,
Yeah.
like, have a strategy around this. Is not just a statement. Is not just something that we do when bad things happen. It's intentional, meaning long term and consistent. So it's a consistent approach over time, whether that's education, like you said, your councils, having a strategy, all of these pieces of it. make the work continue, because it's a journey, not a destination. And your senior leadership team absolutely has to be engaged, because if they don't show up to the training, or they don't show up to the council meetings, or they're not sponsors of employee resource groups, people really quickly figure out like, oh, this is just talking. This
Yeah.
isn't doing. So like, I'm going to get my job done because that's what I'm going to be rewarded for, not for truly acting on the behalf of inclusion. I'm curious, Anthony, like believing in authenticity and bringing your authentic self to the workplace. And there's so much buzz about this, right? With that great resignation, right? People leaving because they don't feel like they could be their full selves. What tips would you offer to folks that are trying to create those authentic experiences in the workplace? What are some things that you've seen organizations do well to provide that for them?
Well, I mean, on the employer side, if you want to create an inclusive environment for all, it's it's different than measuring or trying to assess where you are with diversity, because diversity you can kind of keep the you can, based on who's hiring, you can kind of get your numbers that way, see the different kind of groups that are being hired, and you can figure out the numbers that way. But whereas inclusion, it's a little harder, because now you're kind of, how do you create a metrics to analyze the percentage of people that are not feeling included, and compared to who's feeling included. So I think really that one of the few things you can do is certainly create a survey. Depending on your organization, you can keep it you can keep it confidential. So each person that gets it, it's not they don't we don't you don't know it's obviously confidential. Sometimes some organizations do it where it is not confidential. The person that fills it out, you see it, and whatnot. But really, the most important part, I believe, is I think management needs to discuss with their team individually how they feel, if they feel included. I know it's very difficult if you have a large organization. How do you do that? But you know what, you find the resources. It's really about having that conversation with that person. With the person, how they feel, especially your new hire. I mean, I'm not. You want to focus on all employees, but you also want to focus on your current, or not your current, but people that you just hire, new hires, because obviously you may have hired them because you may feel that diverse, you may feel that they may help and create a diverse work environment. But if they're not feeling included, they're going to leave. So your retention rate
Yep.
is going to be very low.
And that's what we're
So
seeing right now, right? There's this
exactly,
huge like push, let's
people
hire diverse
exactly.
talent, fill these gaps. And yeah, you have the
Yeah.
D, you have the representation, but you don't have the inclusion. So it doesn't really
Now,
matter.
if you have to talk to them and find out what is, if what is the problem, first off, before you even get there, you have to create trust. The manager, and again, there's also that question of who should be the person talking with the employees. I mean, I guess
Mm-hmm.
it depends also on the size of the organization, but if it's a large organization, should it be HR, or should it be a person in the if the organization has a D&I person, or an office with a D&I position, maybe that person should speak to the individuals that were just hired. Again, it depends on the organization. The organization knows their people themselves the most, so they have to figure out which person should do it. But whatever the person is, you want to definitely maintain trust
Yep.
and confidence, because you want your employees to be able to feel comfortable telling you how they feel without
Yep.
having without any kind of setbacks. So you definitely want to create that. So you talk to them, understand what they're going through, and listen to them. Don't just jot down notes and don't do anything, and don't react. Listen to your employees,
Yep.
and make sure you act on them. And I think if you listen to them and act on them, as long as they see that you're trying, I think most employees will accept that. I mean, and if you're trying, then more than likely there will be a point where they will feel included. But you
Mm-hmm.
also can do. I mean, I'm a huge believer also in you need. I mean, diversity and inclusion training um, needs to be had in the workplace. And I don't mean, prior to George Floyd or prior to COVID, a lot of times, we may have had like, as you probably know too, I mean, they would hire people like us to come in, do a training from conscious bias for an hour, and that's it. We wouldn't, you would say to them, by all means, you can contact me, let me know if I could be any future help for anything, but you would hear nothing for the most part. I mean, once in a while you may get a call here or there from an employee that you train or whatnot, but for the most part, really no one ever reached out, and you kind of maybe didn't hear from them for another year or two. But now you're finding that organizations are finally realizing that D&I is really important, and that it's not just a 1 hour training. It's a lifelong, it's a continuous, ongoing, living and breathing component of our lives. So it's not just 1 hour a year. It's 1 hour maybe a week, 1 hour a day, 1 hour, whatever the organization can put time into it. But I think all of the employees should be involved in a diversity inclusion training, and learning what inclusion is, what diversity is, unconscious bias, all the different movements that are happening now, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ, even ageism, all of that, all of those different various factors involved should be all discussed and in training, and then you correlate the training with obvious on skill learning, as far as you have people that are in there that are learning, talking with one another, getting to know one another. You build exercises where they get to talk to one another. They get to know about each other's families, their likes, dislikes, favorite foods. I mean, all those things matter, because that's when you get to know someone, when you get to know the person who they really are, not just the person at work, you then you then lead to other conversations. Those conversations may lead to other conversations, which might be very hard. You may have people that are talking, that have very opposing political views. Right. And we're in an environment now where politics is being discussed. There is that line of not talking about politics really has been crossed, because it's so hard not to, because even if you watch a certain show, that kind of
it's going to come up. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
You can't keep it out of the workplace.
Exactly. You're not there's no way around it. So you might as well get into it. Yeah. I mean, and obviously when I say get into it respectfully, there should be no name calling on either side.
Listening to each other. Yeah.
Listening, and really listening, not just listen, but really listen to what the person has to say. Give them a few minutes, then you can reply. You also don't have to respond right away. There's no rule that you have to say, okay, I have to respond to your response right now. Nope. You could always table the topic for another day.
Yep.
It's just, so I think the education piece is really important too. I think educating people on what inclusion diversity is really helps, because then I think that in itself creates inclusion, because now you're getting everyone together. You're facilitating a conversation where and again, it's not just having the facilitator, like someone like me, just talking the whole hour. You want someone to come in, talk for a few minutes, and then really that person should be able to drive a conversation between everyone in that room on these various topics.
Yep. Or the facilitator.
Exactly, and let it keep going. Let it, it's gonna be a long process.
Yeah.
But I bet you that will show results because obviously on the corporate end, obviously the people in senior leadership want to see numbers. They want to see, is this going to be helpful in my revenue? And we all know the numbers. I mean, a more diverse workforce is about 30% more in revenue. And obviously, inclusion creates obviously more innovative ideas, efficiency. People don't take off left and right. I mean, we all need off, obviously, for vacations, and we've learned.
They're not because they're physically ill, or
exactly. Yeah. They're not ill because they're stressed at work. I mean, and they may have stress, but they're not coming to work. They're choosing, if they're off from work, they're not coming because they're on vacation or because they really are sick, not because they don't want to come to work.
Yep.
So So you have lower attendance. So the numbers are there. So when you create this education piece with it, you're gonna see high revenue at the organization. It's just a matter of taking the time to do it.
Yep.
The resources and time and pulling people, because obviously you have to do it during business hours. So how do you do that? Because obviously you want your employees to do the other work. But it's all manageable. It can certainly be figured out. It's
Yeah,
just
whatever's a priority tends to get done, right? And then this
exactly.
is the part where it's DEI is an unwavering priority. It's not just done when it's cool and when it's in the news cycle, but it
Exactly.
stays
Yeah,
in it.
exactly. You're exactly right. It's a wave. It's like, when I feel back to COVID and George Floyd, but actually when COVID hit, right in March, a lot of the D&I folks who worked in organizations were all laid off. And then soon after the George Floyd incident, you saw D&I really back on there, and a lot of departments were rehiring D&I people. And it's kind of stayed pretty much. I think I haven't seen any dip really with D&I. It's pretty much stayed flat, I think, since all that. And I think it's a continued conversation that keeps happening. But unfortunately, D&I also is a very political topic. Unfortunately, when people hear the word diversity and inclusion, a lot of it people see it as a political talking point or a
Or
buzzword.
I'm not diverse, right? If I'm a
Yes.
white straight man, am I not diverse? Which I think we would both argue that's not necessarily what diversity means.
No. And the other thing with that too is white men need to be involved in the conversation, because white heterosexual men are mostly in the leadership positions right now. And so
Yep.
a lot of them are making the decisions on whether or not certain D&I programs or initiatives should be even happening in the organization. So they need to be in the conversation. They need to be educated just as much as a middle management or a lower level employee. And I hate saying lower level, but someone who's
Front
just
line.
someone who's just starting. They all need the training.
Yep.
So it's just a matter of the time and like you said, the resources and the priority.
Yeah, and Anthony, just shifting gears as we wrap up, one thing I'm curious about with the work you're doing, obviously you and I both do work in the trenches with corporate America and from a professional perspective, but you and I know this work's not like a light switch, I'm just like do it at work and then like, at home I'm a different person. And I know you're personally involved in your community and leading DEI conversations in your community. Can you help our listeners know like how do you drive those conversations in your community? How do with your town council, for example, other than like the flags and showing that we embrace and support diversity? If we have listeners that are like, I don't know how to drive this in my personal spheres in my community, what might be some ways to tangibly take action on DEI at a local level in your community?
No, you made one good point too. You made a lot. You made a lot of good points. But one particular point you made was like when I consult employees or organizations, I also tell them to make sure you're not just doing this here. Make sure you're doing this home or personal, because they both blend together. Especially now, if you're working from home like I am right now, remote. I mean, there is no. I mean, yeah, I have an office space, but it's all blending in together. So make sure you don't be one way, not the try to be, be constant. If you want to be your authentic self at work, be also be it personally, do it on your personal life as well. But to answer your question, as far as community involvement, I think it's just as simple as being involved in certain committees, certain boards. Again, on a local level, you'll be very surprised. There's not a lot of attention. A lot of time, a lot of the attention goes towards presidential elections, federal elected positions. On the local level, though, it's not. It's much different. It's not. In here. I mean, where I live, there's a lot of involvement. But a lot of involvement. I don't mean it's a lot, but there is involvement. Whereas other towns, I'm sure there's not, or there's more. But make sure you attend your council meetings. Most of them are all online. You could find the dates and the times in them. Some of them are now, because of COVID, are now virtual. So you don't have to go. A lot of times you might be able to listen in, or hopefully even able to speak up at a virtual meeting, but definitely attend them, to attend the Board of Ed meetings. We think that they're boring and there's nothing being discussed, but it's not true. There's a lot of important things being discussed. Just to give the listeners a little backup, just a little. I know you want to. I know you want to. I think you want to end soon, but just to give you listeners some insight here. I requested, through the town council for the pride flag to be raised before I was running for town council, and it was denied, 5-1, denied the flag being raised. But my running mate and I, and my running mate especially, she went to the Board of Ed next, and the Board of Ed approves having the pride flag raised. It didn't happen all month long. It happened towards the latter of the month of June. But hey, listen, I'll take a few days. It's better than nothing. But that just shows you that there's different entities involved in each town. So get involved. Get involved on the board. I'm on the board of health on my local level. There's other. I mean, there's environmental committees. A lot of towns have diversity and inclusion committees. Just get out there. Don't be afraid. As an administrator, or you can even reach out to them. They'll get your email and they'll respond. So email them. Say you want to be involved. You don't have to even get involved on a council level. I mean, you can do. We had a Black Lives Matter march here soon after the George Floyd incident. It was run by high school that led it. It was very well. It was social. People masked. We were all 6 feet apart. We were outside. But the little things really add up, and the community sees that. Put a pride flag up on your house. Put a Black Lives Matter, a flag outside, or for women, or each month, put a flag outside, and maybe put a post on social media on why you're doing that. Explain, maybe give a little education. Education comes a long way. People don't know what these different things mean. Even like Black Lives Matter, people don't really know. People that are usually that are opposed to it don't really know. It's even like critical race theory. People that are opposed to it don't really know what it is. They're hearing it on these channels that are saying these various things, but it's not even the true definition of what it is. So
No, I agree.
It's just a matter of, and if you hear someone say something that's not right, like I mentioned earlier on, the word colored or oriental, or if you hear someone saying homophobic things, or that are not even ageism. Anything that's, if you hear something wrong that you don't agree with, express your opinion and say to the other person, that's not cool. That's not how that is. And say, this is why. And if they want to take it, if they want to believe it, they can. If they don't, then they don't.
Yeah, but at least she said something, so they know it's not okay when you're around.
But my main thing really is get involved to some capacity. Again, you don't have to get involved on a government local level. There's so many different things you can do. There's Chamber of Commerce for your business. There's right now things are kind of not coming. But there's food like where I live, and there's a lot of involvement with making sure people that got impacted with COVID have food. Or even here we had Hurricane Ida. You could help out with people that are having trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really what your passion is too. Follow what your passion is, because that's where you're going to do your best work.
Yeah.
So if it's environmental, there's always every town is having now environmental things as far as planting, now it's mums, so people are planting mums around our town. People have lives. We do take everyone's plastic, and we recycle it, we get 500 pounds of plastic, and it then becomes, they recycle it to be to a bench, and then we donate it to a certain part of town. So there's so many things to do. It's just finding out the thing that really interests you. And to me, running for local office really interested me because I have a great passion for the D&I part, and I really wanted to bring that part into the community.
Awesome, Anthony.
So that's
awesome. Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing all your perspectives with us today. How can our listeners stay in touch with you after the show airs?
So different ways. You can my website is AllThingzAP.com. So it's AllThingzAP.com, which is also my Twitter and Instagram handle. So it's at AllThingzAP. Again, that's Twitter, Instagram. I'm on YouTube. If you put All Things App, you'll find me. And then you can also email me Paradiso, so APARADISO @live.com. That's also on my website. So you can find a way to reach me. I'm around.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Diversity Pivot podcast. Allies are necessary for positive change. If you're on the journey to becoming an ally, we invite you to participate in our new signature Lead Like an Ally online self-paced learning program. It's comprehensive, and it includes an online learning platform packed with tools, stories, and ideas to become an even better ally. Head over to leadlikeanally.com to learn more.